Good. We're up to we were looking at Mishnah 14 in my edition, Rabbi Dosa ben Harkinis, who warns about certain bad ways of spending your time. And I just wanted to add a few things. If people want to chime in, absolutely welcome. About the last phrase, V'yeshivat batei knesiot shel amei haaretz. That one of the things that takes us out of the world that is being condemned here as a waste of time, as something that is just not what the right way to spend your life, is Yeshivat batei knesiot shel amei haaretz. So it's been translated in different ways, sitting in the meeting houses of the ignorant people. We've had other translations as well. So we'd said before, not hanging out with kids. If you're an adult, try to get some adult company and don't just be with the children and be involved with talking them up. And now it's about hanging out in certain places. So batei knesiot, of course, we know the word as this is the plural of Beit Knesset. So Beit Knesset means a house of assembly, literally. But we use it as that meaning a house of prayer, right? A Beit Tfilah. The early Batei Knesset started out, as far as we know, not as houses of prayer, but of houses of study. That was where the public reading of the Torah was done, and it was only gradually as the temple rituals disappeared that people started filling in by using those places, which also were, for instance, places of like an inn. A place to if you're stopping on the way, you would sleep there. That's why we make Kiddush in Shul Friday night as a leftover from when people actually used to be staying over for Shabbos in the Beit Knesset. It was like a hostel, and it was a place of people being able to just get a roof over their heads. So and a hot meal, so it was like mesh for everybody. That's what a Beit Knesset was. And here the question is, what do we mean? And we say ignorant people, amei haaretz. We talked a little bit about that last time as well. By the time we have the rabbis are coming around, they have a sense that there's a little bit of a break, and I mentioned that last time also, between some people who were not just ignorant, but were invested in staying ignorant and not being told how to live their Jewish life. They know very well how to do it. Don't tell me. This is what I've been doing. This is what my what I remember. And who are you to tell me differently? So there was a certain friction that developed among some elements in society with some of the rabbis. The rabbis, worked very hard at spreading Torah to everyone. Everyone was invited to be included in this project. It wasn't an elitist club in that sense. And Rabbi Akiva is the person I quoted at the very end. Rabbi Akiva was the great example of the pure militant Am Haaretz, who then turns around and becomes the greatest rabbi of the age or of the ages. So one possible way of reading this is that the Rabbi Dosa is saying, don't go to the shuls of the hoi polloi. Don't go to those shuls, because those are not going to be a good place for you to actually have a spiritual experience. They don't know what they're doing. They don't really try to abide by the practices that we have been encouraging to be adopted by the Jewish people. So don't go there. So that might be one kind of polemical way of saying, make those the shuls that you don't go into. That would be one way to read it, but that's not the general way that most people read it. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to share with you, that's why I had to take a little second here. I want to screen share what Rambam has to say, where he cites this Mishnah. The context is interesting. The context is that the Rambam created, the most comprehensive law code in Judaism. It's called Mishneh Torah, right? So, which means the recapitulation of the whole Torah. And he's pretty much the only codifier who included all Jewish law, including Jewish law that was not applicable anymore. So the Shulchan Aruch, with the famous code of Jewish law that is still very influential today, the Shulchan Aruch only talks about applicable law. It doesn't talk about anything that happened in the temple. So it doesn't have anything to say about any of those things because we don't practice that stuff anymore. So it's only about relevant to today Jewish living. But Rambam said, no, if I'm going to codify Jewish law, I'm going to codify everything. So he has whole sections on how to, what are the proper measurements of the implements of the temple, and how do you do the sacrifices and ritual impurity and so on. And when he talks about ritual impurity, he has a whole section on tzara'at, on what we call, for lack of a better term, leprosy, right? Which I've said a zillion times. I'll say it one more time. It's not leprosy. Some kind of biblical skin affliction that rendered a person ritually impure. So that section is included in his book. He's got 14 books with different overall topics. So one whole book is on ritual impurity. And in that, he has a subsection on the laws of tzara'at. So what he also did was, whenever he had a section of law, whatever it was, on blessings, on holidays, and so on and so forth, he would always end the section with a kind of a little homiletic lesson. He would end the legal part of it with a little bit of a let's take some meaning out of this. What's the moral of the story? So here is his part of his discussion about what the laws of leprosy are supposed to be teaching us, and he follows very much the approach of the rabbis that tzara'at was an affliction specifically having to do with evil speech, right? With slander and gossip, and backbiting behind somebody's presence and undermining them and so on. So we've had that discussion many times. So he accepts that as the basic underlying trigger for tzara'at. And now he's going to say, hopefully I'll be able to share this, and we're going to follow him. This is his conclusion of that very technical legal section. Okay. So this is, as you see, defilement by leprosy, chapter 16. Okay, this is from Sefaria, which is a very wonderful resource, which has a lot of classical texts, and a lot of them with translation. So here it is. How about somebody trying to read this? Go ahead, Sarita.
It is therefore proper for the man who would steer his course of life aright to shun their company and refrain from talking with them, that he should not be caught in the net of evil and arrogant men.
Okay, so we can piece that from before this. So he says there are plenty of people who don't pay any attention to these rules of proper speech. There are plenty of people who have all kinds of agendas, who try to mess around with society, try to mess around with people. So each person has to be on the lookout not to associate with them.
The company of wicked mockers follows this usage, At the outset, they indulge in much idle talk, as it is written, a fool's voice comes with a multitude of words. Thereupon they fall into discrediting, thereupon they fall into discrediting the upright, as it is written, let dumbness strike the lying lip that speak insolence against the just. Then they get into the habit of talking against the prophets and discrediting their words. As it is written, they mocked God's messengers, despised his words, and derided his prophets.
Okay, so as we're following along, we're saying what we're seeing is that Rambam sees this as a progression. Don't think that just idle talk is innocuous, because actually idle talk is used by certain segments of society as the gateway drug, so to speak, the way to get you into the more toxic stuff about how to talk about things. So first, they'll just sort of like chit chat with you, but then their agenda is that if you start being friendly, then they'll start going into, as it says here, discrediting the upright, right? They'll start saying, oh, can you imagine what this person said, or this person did, or that group, right? They start testing the waters. How much are you going to start, and now you've become friends with them. So it's uncomfortable to say, no, are you kidding? You're crazy, but because you've been hooked into the group. And then the next thing is that they will start attacking the prophets themselves and despising God's words and the words of the prophets. Then
they come to speak against God and to deny the very principle of religion, as it is written, the Israelites devised things that were not right against the Lord their God. It is written, moreover, they set their mouthings against heaven, and their tongue roams the earth. What caused them to set their mouthings against heaven? Their tongue, which first roamed the earth. Such is the conversation of the wicked, occasioned by their sitting at street corners, the meeting places of the ignorant.
So the meeting places of the ignorant, and this is, of course, a text written by Rambam in Hebrew. The meeting places of the ignorant is Batei Knesiot Shel Amei Haaretz. Okay, go ahead.
And the company of drunkards in the taverns. The conversation of worthy Jews, on the other hand, is permeated with words of Torah and wisdom. For this reason, God lends them aid and bestows wisdom upon them, as it is written, when those who revered the Lord spoke to each other, the Lord heeded and heard them, and a book of remembrance was written before him of those who revered the Lord and adhered to him.
Okay, and that's the end of this section. So when we look at this text by Rambam, the way he's looking at it is that this advice, don't hang out in the gathering places of the ignorant, is actually not an attack on the ignorant. What it is an attack on is people who manipulate the ignorant, who take advantage of the ignorance of people in order to rabble rouse, in order to purvey fake facts, and to get them all pumped up about false issues, but they take advantage of them because they unfortunately are at the bottom of society, or they're stuck with certain situations and so on. So very, from my perspective, very, very relevant, unfortunately, tragically, to what's going on today. And what he's saying is beware, don't go there, because it's not going to be innocuous. Right now, of course, we struggle with the question, so how the heck are we ever going to make any progress to change anything? If the bad guys own the media that the ignorant watch and the ignorant listen to, how are you going to get anybody to listen to anything different? Do you go back into there? I mean, how do you do it? I think that one of the things that Rambam would say is, well, it depends. If you have the podium, if you have the floor, then you use it, right? And if you can arrange to come to the gathering place, and they're going to listen to what you have to present, that's great. But the problem is that if you just go there where it's already in the hands of the people who have hijacked it, you're not gonna get very far. So you'll just be adding another body to the crowd, and then they'll celebrate that. Did you see a packed house? I had more people watching me speak than ever happened in all of history, right? And you end up becoming part of the statistics, part of the fake statistics. Sarita, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, while I was reading it, the idea about the misinformation echo chambers, and also when people, it struck me that when people talk about the process of radicalization, it really starts by bringing somebody in and making them feel part of a community, and then you can indoctrinate them. And I think one of the difficulties is that the people who are attending, right, the assemblies of the ignorant, may not know it. I mean, these aren't, you fall into hearing and listening to the same thing over and over again, and you just might not realize that it is misinformation, that perhaps it's pushing you toward values that you wouldn't really uphold. So I think that that's also a problem.
Yeah. Josie.
Well, what are you supposed to do then if you find someone in your circle who makes fun of religion and makes fun of your attachment to a synagogue, and you're supposed to walk away and not engage? Is that the message?
Well, first of all, I think that what Rambam is talking about is where the balance is a lot less even. It's not a one-on-one, right? It's when you find yourself in a club, in a society, in a conference that has, that's all about this kind of stuff. You're not going to be able to, to withstand that if you, if it's not, again, everything is complicated. If you're trying to undermine it, if you're trying to get into it, if you're a secret agent, that's a whole other thing. Although the stories of secret agents who end up getting turned into, adherents of the thing that they're supposed to be, against, is also a sorry history. When it's more of a one-on-one, like you're talking about, then it's really sticky and there's no magic bullet. But then at least it's an even playing field, so to speak. And if it's friendship that's operating, then is it possible for you to say, what you're saying is against me? I do find meaning in my religion. I do find that this is something worthwhile in my life. You're my friend. Do you recognize that what you're saying completely denies me? Is that okay? Why are you saying that? Or what do you think, this means to say this when I totally disagree and this is part of my life? Could you say that? I think that there's a lot of fear, unfortunately, about being honest with one another in these kinds of conversations. But again, like I'm saying, this is a hypothetical. If you're referring to a real situation that you've encountered, you might, you obviously know what you're talking about and I don't. But if there is that basis of friendship, or even if it's not, if it's simply just an encounter between two people, if you can hold your anger and you can hold your bile and so on, and simply say, but this is, I don't see it that way. This is actually very good for me in my life. Even if it's not, so why are you saying this against me? Even if it's just a counter testimony, then that might be worthwhile. I had a really awful, for me, shocking encounter with another colleague who saw something totally differently and was really not on board with something that I thought was an important thing to do. And they were a little blunt in their dismissiveness of it. And I just simply say, well, you know what? I think we really see the world very differently from each other. And I left it at that. Yeah, Sarita.
So, in terms of this issue about what do you do, going to the assembly and trying to address the assembly, I think doesn't do anything, because when people have come to see things in a particular way and they're all together, you're just going to get booed. And in fact, there's even cases where somebody who might be honored by the group would get booed for saying something that doesn't align with the group. It's interesting that, for instance, at the this NRA convention, the people who decided not to speak, who had been originally scheduled to speak, I think that they sort of recognized that anything that they said might just get sort of totally disregarded. And instead, I think to Josie's point is you actually have to engage on an individual level, and have conversations and be open and not totally reject. So I think that the way to break through is one-on-one, and not trying to go up against the mass, as it were.
Yeah. Anybody else? Beryl, what's the hat? What's the headdress?
Memorial Day-ish.
Ah, see. All right. Very good. Good. All right. So let's do a quick, the last few minutes that we have, let's do a quick dip into the next Mishnah. And Rabbi Elazar Hamodai is our next teacher. So Sarita, you're doing the honors today, please.
Oh, I thought that Geraldine was our designated reader. Okay. Rabbi Elazar of Modin said, he who profanes things sacred and despises the festivals and puts his fellow man to shame in public and makes void the covenant of Abraham our father and makes the Torah bear a meaning other than the right, such a one, even though knowledge of the Torah and good deeds be his, has no share in the world to come.
Right. So we got a whole list here of things that this person might be guilty of. We start with the bottom, right? To start with the bottom, this is a person who apparently is knowledgeable. This person has Torah and has Maasim Tovim and has good deeds, right? So they've done good things and they're knowledgeable. Nevertheless, look at some of the things that this person might be guilty of, right? So the first thing is profaning the sacred. Then despising or casting contempt upon the festivals. Then the next one is embarrassing somebody in public. Then the next one is to cancel out the covenant of Abraham. That means most likely not to be circumcised or to go on a campaign against circumcision. And then finally, a person who, as it says here, interprets the Torah. What was the translation that you had?
Makes the Torah bear a meaning other than the right.
Okay, other than the right one.
Other than the correct.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so that's this person may be guilty of one or more of these things, even though they know Torah and even though they do a lot of other good things. So this is something that's going to be a complicated teaching for us to unpack. Let's just get real quickly the other translation. Does that before the consensus translation, right? All of us have some version of a consensus translation that follows pretty much what Sarita said. Geraldine, do you have any other modifications on that?
No, it's pretty much the same, just,
All right,
different
little
words
things here and there.
substituted
Okay.
here and there.
Okay. So you want to flip a coin? Bill, Josie, who's going to read for us?
I'll defer to Josie, since I came late.
Okay.
Rabbi
Josie, you got it?
Moadai teaches, if you mock the sacred, disgrace the festivals, humiliate people in public, deny your heritage, or pit Torah against tradition, even study and kindness will not secure you a place in the world to come.
Okay. And just a quick, at first blush, it sounds actually pretty much congruent with what we had before, just putting it into, sort of more contemporary language. So let's go back to this and next time, look it over one by one or as a whole. Next week, Sunday, is Shavuot. So we will be, all of us will be in synagogue, right? At 9:30 sharp. Everybody's invited. Okay, and of course the tikkun is Saturday night. It's going to be at Ner Tamid this year. It should be pretty interesting. The guest scholar, somebody that I nominated, is a woman who has created a whole Hebrew text of the Torah in feminine. Right, so the idea is that the Torah is notoriously, as we know, focused on men above all, and God is mostly talked about in male language, and the men are the focus, the audience, and the participants. So she has grammatically, textually, and so on, completely rethought every single verse in the Torah, and rewritten a version that takes it all from a feminine perspective. So she's going to be the scholar in residence. And of course, we also have plenty of cheesecake and plenty of other sessions through the night. So everybody take a look at the schedule, and everybody's invited for that. And then Sunday morning and Monday morning, Shavuos. Monday is also Yizkor. Okay, Sei gesinnt, everybody.
Bye-bye, everyone.